Hello, hello, everyone. Today is July 7th. This is a release engineering sub-project meeting. It's a meeting that is recorded and available on the internet. So please be mindful of what you say and do. Please be sure to adhere to the Kubernetes code of conduct. And in general, just be awesome people. So we've got a few things on the agenda, and I will let Carlos and Sasha kick it off.
Hey, yeah, so can we wait around about 30 minutes for Carlos? He said that he will join in 30 minutes or so.
No, we got to do it right now. Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Jeremy, hope your arm is feeling better. Yes, we can do that. Give me a second. Okay. Okay, so we will talk about the upcoming branch cut and version markers. So maybe this would have been good if Carlos is on for it too. Okay, so Sasha, who is currently planning to do the branch cut for 119?
I think we don't have a decision yet.
Okay. So I will walk through the mess that we're jumping into in a bit. But I'm going to take care of the branch cut itself. Someone else can take care of the release part. But there's some idiosyncrasies about the branch cut that I'm making changes to, and will be a lot worse if multiple people do it. And I'll walk through that right now. Okay, so share my screen. Can everyone see this okay?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. All right, so you may have seen some changes jump through, and Lubomir, I am actually happy that you're on this call because this is relevant information for you too. So I'll walk through this PR. Essentially what's happening is I'm trying to get rid of the generic version markers. So anyone who's not familiar with the version markers, essentially the version markers are what we use in what we use across CI, as well as various jobs, various scripts to target specific releases of Kubernetes. So we've got a few different buckets that we store release artifacts in. So one of them is Kubernetes release, right? And you can see that there are a variety of Kubernetes versions going all the way back to sub 1.y.z. But you can see that there are some version markers in here, right? Latest 1.0 txt. If we look at the latest 119, and then we also look at the latest stable 118, right? You can see that for the release markers, it points to, so this latest 119 will point to the latest pre-release that is available for 119, right? Which is 119 beta 2, right? So if I was to use this in a script, I could say, you know, I'm looking for release latest 119 and target this for downloads. Say I wanted to download pre-release artifacts from this bucket. If I was to go to here, right? Oop. Maybe that's not available that way. V119. Okay. Different place. Interesting. Okay. If we look at it from the CI bucket, right? If I look at the latest 119 marker, right, it gives me 119 dot a build number plus, this is actually so this is one of the CI build numbers, as well as the SHA for the current commit, or the last commit that it was that one of our jobs built against, right? So going a little deeper, these are related to the CI Kubernetes build jobs that are in test infra, right? And these jobs, these jobs are responsible for basically creating the builds that we use, that we extract in various jobs across test infra, like the end-to-end jobs, right? So we have one of these Kubernetes build jobs across each of the release branches. But the curious part you'll notice is that, and we also do something, an extra publish file. So we'll publish a Kate's master.txt, which should match that 119 marker, right? So the curious thing is that we also have where was I? Okay, we also have a build fast job, right? And let me just make this a little bigger. So we also have a build fast job, which has this fast flag. Essentially what this does is it does a make quick release, the equivalent of a make quick release on the Kubernetes repo. The make quick release will, instead of building cross artifacts, so artifacts from multiple architectures, it'll only build the Linux AMD 64 markers. So what's interesting about this is this condition only exists for the master branch. And what eventually happens as a result of that, if we were to look at some of the test jobs, we can see that if we look at the build master fast, and we look at the durations for some of these, we can see that the durations for the jobs, they're pretty fast, right? It's running, about 2 minutes, right? And if I scroll through here, we can see that there are some that run for longer, right? We've got some failures, but we can see that there's some run for longer. And this is an example. 20 minutes is about what I would expect, 20 to 30 minutes for one of the fast builds. So what happens at the end of this build is that it writes a version marker, right? And it says, hey, I'm changing the ACL, but hey, I'm copying this latest .119 txt. You can also see it's writing a latest -1, so the major version .txt, and then a latest version file as well, right? So what's tricky here is this is different behavior from the rest of the branches. So the latest, the build fast job runs every 5 minutes, right? And the regular build job, or the cross build job, runs every hour. So what happens with these jobs when they notice that a build for that version number has already run, it will show you some output like this. And let's see. Right, so it says, hey, I want to do this. I want to do the Kubernetes build scenario. I want to extra publish with these files, and I want to publish any images to the CI images bucket. The first thing it will do is it's going to go into the bucket and see if it can ls the build version and and then also the directory that is named after the build version, and then also the kubernetes.tar gz within that directory, and then the bin subdirectory within that directory. If it notices those files or directories exist, it's going to say that the build already exists and exit, right? The problem with this is this means that the cross builds are looking at the results, are often looking at the results of one of the fast builds, right? So if the cross build notices, so it's kind of, so the fast build is essentially racing the cross build because it's using the same version markers and noting that it doesn't need to run, which is not true. So the instances where we get cross builds on the master branch are essentially only instances where the cross build interval, the interval to build it every hour, it's only instances where that cross build beats the fast build, right? And this is problematic for making sure that we actually get new versions of the cross build, because if we've got the fast one running every 5 minutes, it's really likely that the fast build will write to the buckets first, right? So I kind of went down a rabbit hole working on untangling some of this stuff. And there are some commits you can, I've left breadcrumbs across a bunch of these PRs where you can check out exactly how that's happening. Explained in more detail here. So what I wanted to do was set it up so that fast builds and cross builds would write to different locations in the bucket, different locations within that GCS bucket, so that they wouldn't overlap. The fast builds would not be beating the cross builds to write. So looking at this PR really quick, I kind of inverted some of the logic that I was doing before. Basically, if the flag is fast, instead of writing a, what it previously was type dash version major and then type dash version major dot version minor. After some iteration, landed on if we have a fast flag, then we want to write type dash fast, type dash version major dash fast, and then type dash version major version minor dash fast, right? And then, we're going to update this build destination to write to this fast location instead, right? So this PR has merged what's open right now is the test infra side of it, which is here. So we do a few things in this PR. We remove this cross marker that I was trying to play around with. Essentially, I didn't want to cast the cross builds to another location because the cross builds are pretty much what we always do. There's only one scenario on the master branch where we're only writing a fast build, right? So we remove these cross markers here. And there is, within kubetest, there's an extract kates.go file, which is responsible for recognizing the types of, they have extract strategies, right? So it's able to recognize what kind of extraction of build jobs you're doing, right? So in our case, usually when we're running build jobs, we're extracting using the CI extraction strategy, right? Which basically says, if you ask me to extract a version that looks like CI slash anything, then I want you to go look for those artifacts in Kubernetes release dev slash CI. So we've added a CI fast extraction strategy. So basically, if you give me an extract of CI slash anything dash fast, then I want you to instead look in this fast bucket, right? So that matches what we did on the push build side, right? to go look for stuff in that fast bucket, right? And then we also need to, so that's the extraction side, which is used for the CI jobs. Um, for the specifically for the end-to-end jobs, right, that we run across test infra, specifically for the build job, the build scenarios, what we've added in are this dash fast flag, which fast was already here, but it wasn't wired up to pass that flag into the push build script afterwards. So basically what's happening now is we're saying parse that argument. We want to store that as true, so that we can use this later in various functions. One of the functions that we use here is check build exists, right? So check build exists is the one that's spitting out the, hey, build exists, I'm going to exit out of this attempt at a build job, right? And we're saying for the mode, uh, we're saying for the GCS bucket, I want you to take Kubernetes release dev, the mode is CI, so /CI, and then fast. So if you've been provided the fast flag, then I want you to look in the fast location instead, right? So that's kind of this PR. It leads to, so I know that was a bunch. Any questions on that first? Okay, all right. So that leads to preparing the job configs for 119 release branch cut. So I attempted to show Tim this yesterday, but Basil hung my computer while I was screen sharing, so I'm not going to attempt that here. But to actually see what some of what this PR is doing. But we have we have a file in the test infra repo called releng test_config.yaml. So that's this file here. And basically what that file contains, and let's look at a clean version of it. So this file contains essentially stubs for the generated tests, right? So it has part of a test name and some important information about it, right? So the interval for the test, the arguments that you might use, and which SIGs own them, right? So this file is quite long. You can see that some of the names are Kate's beta, Kate's stable 1, Kate's stable 2, so on and so forth, right? So currently, these roughly, previously, these roughly mapped to the version markers, the generic version markers. So Kate's dash master, Kate's dash beta, Kate's dash stable 1, 2, and 3. The issue that we often run into with the Kate's beta version marker is that beta shifts depending on what portion of the release cycle you're in, right? So if you're in development, if you're in the beta phase of the cycle, then beta is actually accurate, right? Assuming that we've updated it to be accurate. So right now we're in the beta phase of the 119 release cycle. So if we were to look to the Kate's beta version marker, we would expect that version marker to be something around 119, right? We can see that it's 118.6, so incorrect, right? So that means whichever jobs are using this Kate's beta marker are not getting an accurate depiction of the state of the world right now, right? Once we pass the beta phase, we've actually released 119, say. At that point, we should switch the beta marker back to master, right? So it's essentially making it inactive, right? So we often run into a lack of understanding around when these markers should be shifted, or we don't do it. And what causes this what ends up happening is that any job using these Kate's beta version markers are inaccurate. Um, so so I've been working over the last few cycles to try to push this towards some sanity, and uh, continuing down through this config, kind of long, you'll see that there is a Kate's version uh, block, and I passed it right here. So Kate's version, right? So originally these, so we have dev, beta, stable 1, 2, and 3. Originally, these were set to Kate's master, Kate's beta, Kate's stable 1, 2, and 3, right? Um, I had made the change, I think, last cycle or the cycle before that. So these point to explicit versions. So this is pointing to 119 right now, beta is pointing to 118, 117, and so on, right? The reason for this is that we can now expect those jobs to do something known, without having to guess what the beta marker is at any one time. So when we were in the 118 cycle, this was accurate. Now this should be switched back to latest. But I want to get rid of this marker altogether because it's confusing. So let's talk about this PR that's open. Okay, so walking through this PR, we're eight. Okay. So we're dropping the test config for the beta jobs, and we're adding a stable 4 config, right? Um, the reason we're doing this is kind of twofold. One, it's for what I already mentioned, the fact that these beta markers are confusing. Depending on what part of the cycle you're in, you basically have to know what that marker is doing for you to be successful writing jobs. So what we're doing instead is establishing a stable 4 marker, and essentially you can see all of the stuff is just kind of shifting down, right? So we're pointing at latest 18, 118 for stable 1, and then 117 and down for stables 2 through 4. So this is essentially prepping us for the branch cut. Once we have a config rotator, a prepare release branch job that runs within, that we manually run during the branch cut, and then which will rotate these a version down. So this will become 19, 18, 17, and 16, right? So part of the reason that we're doing this is also on the back to the LTS discussions that we're having, and extending annual support, extending support for Kubernetes to be annual, right? So there are instances where we'll need to have this job open for longer, right? So 116 is going to be supported for longer than it was before, right? Which means we need to continue running CI jobs against that branch. So this marker is essentially to allow for that support, and also to kind of get rid of the beta marker. So in instances where stable 1 is coming up, right? So stable 1 will now be 119 as we move into the RC, the branch cut and the RC. And then this PR goes into kind of removing some of the Kate's beta test stubs, and then adding the stable 4 ones instead. And you can see where this plays out in generating the test jobs, which will be a long file up here. So there is a hack update generated tests.sh within test infra, and you can see that these are all shifting down one, essentially Kate's beta to stable 1, stable 1 to stable 2, so on and so forth, right? So this PR needs to go in before the branch cut, as well as the PR to publish fast builds, so we can get out of that race. And I think there might be one more, or yes, there is one more that will tweak the generated, the generic suffixes. So if you've ever seen, so I'll stop for questions first. Any questions on this stuff? Okay. So if you've ever seen a generic suffix before, let's see if we can find one. Or some of these test grid annotations where fork per release generic suffix, right? So copy this and give you an example here. Right. So when you specify fork per release generic suffix in the annotations for a test job, when the config forker runs through this job, what it'll do is when it forks the job to a new branch, so when we say fork per release true, what we're basically saying is, I want a copy of this job in the release branch when you cut it, right? So this copy, it can't necessarily be the same job. Maybe it doesn't run on the same interval. Maybe it doesn't run against the same branch. Maybe it has slightly different configurations. Maybe it does an extraction of a CI build job that needs to be different from the one that's done in master, right? So we can see the master one is CI/latest. And then we can also see that the master job doesn't have any like specific indicators about like what branch it's running on. So we kind of assume that it's master, right? So now if we look at one of the release branches, right? So let's just copy this job name. And if I go to Kubernetes and sig release branch jobs, and 118, and search for this job, right, we can see that when the job was forked, it was actually forked to be named, it was actually renamed to be plugin GPU-beta, right? So when you specify that, that generic suffix, that's essentially what it'll do. It'll rename it in such a way that like, oh, well, it's on the master branch, and I know that it's going to beta now, so rename it to have a beta at the end. What it doesn't handle well, unless you configure it in a certain manner, is handling these extractions, right? So this should actually say latest dash 118, right? So there's a bit of confusion about how these things work, and they don't always work as well as you want them to, depending on how the job is configured. So so eventually the goal is to hopefully get rid of the need for these generic suffix trues. If we were to look at a different job, let's see if we can compare. Let's do this one, right? So CI Kubernetes node kubelet features -1-18, right? And now let's compare this to the job that would be running on the master branch, right? So we can see this in node kubelet. We can actually see this just from Hound, right? You can see that there's a test grid config for CI node kubelet features. And then within the actual job configs, you can see that this, maybe it's worthwhile opening this up anyway, right? So you can see that this one has fork per release true, but it does not have the fork per release generic suffix true set, right? Which means that every time it forks across a release, when the config is rotated, it will fork with its branch name intact, or with representative with a name representative of the branch that it's running on, right? So 118, 117, 116. So we want this to happen for really all jobs. So it's very clear what content this job is running against. And if we do a quick look at here, we can also see that when we did the rotation for this job, right, looking at the extract for repo, right? So I said I want to take out, I want to check out Kubernetes at master for the job that is running on the master branch. If we compare that to the 118 one, we can see that the config forker did the right thing, right? And checked out the 118 branch instead, right? Its name is correct. Its test grid tab name it notes that it's on the 118 branch, and it's also it's also visible in the 118 test grid dashboard, right? So this is what we want. This is kind of the behavior that we want. We want a job when it forks to be to indicate which branch it is running for, as well as popping up in the right tabs within test grid. So that's kind of some of the impetus for this change, to make it a little clearer about where jobs are running, to clean up some of their configs when they're forked, so on and so forth. So these are a few of the things that need to land before the release 119 branch cut happens. And the reason I say that is if it doesn't land, so basically the rotation, the creation of the branch is kind of the one-time opportunity, or it's not a one-time opportunity, but it's a one-time automatic opportunity or semi-automatic opportunity for all of the numbers to shift in line with the branch that they're related to. If you don't do it properly before the branch cut, it means that anything after the branch cut is essentially a manual change, right? So this would be someone painstakingly going through each of these configs and making sure that each of the flags for test grid annotations and the branches that they're targeting and the CI versions that they're extracting are all correct. So I want to try to avoid that. We have our release, the RC1 for 119 on Thursday. And I'm going to try to get these PRs merged ahead of time. So that's that for that long presentation. Any questions on that content? Okay. Lubomir, specifically to you, does that sound like that would be useful? Okay, Lubomir's hiding. All right, we're gonna move on to the next thing that's up, and I believe that is Sasha and Carlos. I believe you're both on now. You want to chat about your PRs?
Hello. I don't know. Is Sasha, do you want to start or do I?
Oh no, you can go ahead.
Okay.
Just start.
Yeah, we had like an idea, I guess, a couple of weeks ago. We have this tedious task that is copying all the comments, links, and everything for that we usually use in CREL to the GitHub issue, like for adding the stages and all the stuff. And we think about to create like a CREL subcommand to help us to fill this tedious work and generate all the table for us. You just then, in the end of the entire cut, you just issue that command, get the output, and then copy and paste in the GitHub issue. Can I share my screen?
You should be able to, but let me know if you can't.
No, disable.
Okay. Ooh.
Yeah, for example, that one.
You're not sharing right now. Hold on.
Yes. Okay. No, still not.
Nope. Hold on. All right, and okay, go for it.
Okay, nice. Okay, what's this? What I'm talking about is specifically this table here until here, the mock stage, mock release, stage, and release. Most of the time we need to copy and paste and edit this several times during the process. And the idea is like partial automate this using the CREL subcommand to generate all this stuff. For example, can you guys see this screen? It's on good
You
size?
gotta, yeah, you gotta make the text much bigger.
Like
Yeah,
this is
that's
good?
good. That's
yeah,
good.
the output will be very bad, but it doesn't matter. Okay, then the idea is like generate CREL GCBM manager, generate, then we select a date from, and from which branch. And when we run this, issue this comment, oh, it's really bad. It generates all the commands we used to run to cut the release in this date for the release 118 branch, and they generate all the, I think I can make it better here. And then it generates all this stuff for us, and then you just copy and paste in the GitHub issue. It generates the commands, it generates everything based on the job we submitted. This is the idea.
Yeah,
maybe in the future we can issue this command and they update the GitHub issue automatically for us. Sasha suggests that, but I was like, the first, let's try this, and then we maybe push to the automatically does that for us.
So I think this is awesome. I think copying and pasting the commands back and forth is one of my least favorite parts of the release process, and I'm sure that that is probably probably the inspiration for doing this. I saw the PR flyby, and I have two comments. One, and I'm not sure if this is a side effect of the library, but
Gesundheit.
I thought it was going to be a sneeze. So the first piece is for markdown tables, you only need 3 of the dashes to generate the table. So if that helps with the output, if you can limit that to 3 of the dashes, that should make it read a little bit better.
Yeah.
And it will mean that we won't have diffs if we decide to put this somewhere else if the table size changes, right?
Yeah.
And the second one would be Can we call this history instead of generate? Generate
Yes.
doesn't really give you an idea of what we're generating, but history kind of is analogous to the history command, and it gives you an idea of we're getting GCB manager history, right?
Yeah, sounds great.
So,
That's it.
and Tim says, I can't wait for copy pasting to go away because each item is just a step in a Jenkins or other plugin and other pipeline, excuse me. Um, So
That's
yes, one day, one day, Tim, one day we'll have robots running this entire thing.
The more we have this decomposed into little steps, and each step is like its own reliable little thing, the more confidently it just naturally fits in a pipeline.
Soon, soon, and by soon I mean like a year. um, so that's awesome. I know Carlos and Sasha. I know y'all had a few more PRs up. I don't know if you wanted to do quick review here. If there's anything pressing that you want to talk about.
Not from my side. We can do the reviews here as well.
Yeah, I don't have big changes on my side right now.
Okay, cool. All right, so the last one is Go 115. Okay, Veronica and Marky are not on this call. But so we had the painstaking chore of updating Go 114. That work started in February, I believe, and I completed it in June, mid to late June. So the reason for this was a variety of things. There were some scalability issues that were fixed earlier in the cycle, earlier in the previous cycle. There were some issues with etcd, bbolt, and unsafe library usage that were potentially problematic for us. So we were kind of waiting until various updates happened on the Go side, as well as the etcd side. Those finally happened. The tricky thing about waiting for updates means you're also carrying different versions of the kubecross version. There's some maintenance work, essentially bumping to a new kubecross version, promoting that image, updating the Kate's Cloud Builder image to support that new kubecross version, rebasing the PR, fixing any test failures that come out of those PRs, changing the Kubikins E image within test infra to support the new Go version, and then kind of iterating through that cycle over and over, depending on what version comes out. So the original plan was to update to Go 113.12 on master, and then cherry pick that over to the 118, 117, and 116 branches. Because Go 114.4 landed in master before 113.12, I'm going to say that the 113.12 updates should not happen on the 118, 117, and 116 branches. We've also heard that there are a variety of things to watch out for in Go 114 that makes its usage questionable for us. So we're going to be waiting for Go 115. So the interesting thing about 115 is this presents a bit of a dilemma for us because we've not updated to 114 in the previous branches. We're essentially going to be jumping. We're going to be updating to Go 115 on master, and then we're going to be jumping to 115 within the active release branches. This is something that, as far as I know, we have not done before. Um, Also, Go 115 is not out yet. So this time around, we're going to attempt to consume a pre-release of Go and see what happens if we have the container images that we need at hand, if they're properly versioned, so on and so forth, if we can actually go through the flow that we're going through right now to update Go with a pre-release version, so that we can kind of get ahead of, instead of spending 4 months trying to get a new version out. Hopefully we can do it much sooner than that. Usually we're able to turn it around a lot sooner than that. So we're going to try to land that for 119. I feel like we need to land that for 119, and because of our support, our extended support cycle, we also need to be able to pull this into the release branches. We cannot have release branches that are 2 versions behind master and the most recent release branch, because that doesn't play well for us supporting release branches in general, right? If our Go version for release branches goes out of support for them as upstream, then we have problems on the supportability path overall. So this should be interesting. Any questions on that?
Is there a go, no-go time for this?
Jim, not yet.
Stand
Right
in the corner, Jim. Stand in the corner.
Go, no go as we have it. Right now, the upside of where we're at in the release cycle right now is that as we move into the RC1 that's happening on Thursday, there's still an RC2 and RC3, and before the eventual release, as well as a blackout period. So we have a decent chunk of time to get some testing in where there will be a lot less changes on the branches because of code freeze. So the hope is that this should, I'm not going to say this is going to go off without a hitch. I'm not going to jinx myself like that. I already know that there are going to be issues, but it should be, we should have enough time to get through testing for this ahead of the 119 release. So what we're waiting for right now is I've been scratching my head and trying to figure out if we should go ahead with using their beta 1, which is out right now. My feeling is that I want to wait for their RC before we start trying to ingest it. So Tim and I have an open thread with the Go team. I'll reach back out and talk a little bit about like what's the expected release time for the RC, as well as when can we expect images to be available, because essentially what we need to get started with the process is the cube cross image, which needs a current Go image from upstream. So stay tuned. I will have more details as I will give y'all more details as I get them. And hopefully this shouldn't be too impactful for the cycle. So cool. We are at the end of our agenda. If there are topics that y'all want to discuss outside of that, feel free to just toss them out, unmute. All right, well, we will call it. Thank you all for hanging out. As always, lovely to see all your faces. We've got, if you're on the release team, you've got more release meetings for the week. If you are not on the release team, or the next meeting will be the SIG release meeting next week, same time slot. So we'll catch you there and see you on the channels and the interwebs and all that good stuff. Take it easy.
See ya.